The event I'll be presenting today is Bisexual Clients. We aren't who you think we are. A bit about the event details. This event was presented by Dr. Raven James at Governor State University through a webinar hosted by the ATTC Center of Excellence on June 26, 2015. A bit about the speaker background. Dr. James is an expert in the field of addiction studies and behavioral health. She has her PhD in human sexuality and has worked in the health professions field for over 20 years. She provides counseling and addiction training to professionals at state and national levels, and her research focuses on women, LGBTQ, sexuality, HIV prevention, and sexual health in the recovery process. Some important definitions discussed in her presentation include bisexuality, which is the emotional, romantic, and/or physical attraction to more than one gender, which may or may not be sexual attraction. So people can define themselves based on their feelings towards people of the same or opposite sex, and it doesn't have to be strictly sexual. Next is sexual fluidity, which is the ability to move and change sexuality throughout time, meaning that there is a gray area, everything's not black or white, straight or gay, and this best fits the bisexual identity because it is kind of in between. Next is biphobia, which is the fear of bisexuals, and finally, bi-invisibility, which is simply ignoring the existence of bisexuals. Some important things to consider include that many different sexualities can fit under the term bisexual. It's important not to make assumptions based on what a person's current situation is or what little information you have. Two women could be together and not simply be lesbians. One of them could be bisexual, one could be a lesbian. It really depends on their situation, but you should not assume that. There's actually a higher percentage of people who self-identify as bisexual than what there are people who self-identify as homosexuals. And finally, not all people who have bisexual tendencies identify themselves to be bisexuals due to the stigmas or fears that are surrounding the bisexual identity. So now we're going to talk about biphobia. There are some common forms including bisexual denial, which is the idea that bisexuals should just make up their minds and that they're simply confused about their own sexuality. Bisexual invisibility, which is you can only be straight or gay, and people will often assume what your sexuality is based on who your current partner is. Bisexual exclusion is failing to provide services and information to bisexuals that are often provided for other sexual identities. Bisexual marginalization is not treating bisexuality as bisexual problems as issues, but if a homosexual was experiencing the same problems, they would be considered issues. And there are a lot of negative stereotypes that surround bisexuals. Some effects of these biphobias are discrimination due to sexual orientation. Bisexuals are more likely to be sexually harassed than heterosexuals, and they're often stereotyped to be more likely to cheat on their partners. Some important theories that we discussed regarding to sexual orientation include the Kinsey scale, which is a sexual continuum ranging from strictly homosexual to strictly heterosexual. The identity that one chooses to identify themselves with doesn't always match their actions. Next is the Klein grid, which you fill out a grid based on specific variables for past, present, future, and ideal situations, and that will gauge your sexual fluidity over time. This grid is used to identify four main types of bisexuals, including transitional, historical, sequential, and concurrent. Dr. James also discusses some health effects that are associated with being bisexual. Bisexuals are more likely to be depressed or have anxiety. They have higher rates of hypertension, poor physical health, and higher drinking and smoking rates. They may not come out to doctors due to past negative experiences, so they are not informed of certain risks that come along with being bisexual. And many safer sex programs don't address bisexuality. It's important now that we focus on managing the stigma. The stigma is created because many people don't believe in gender fluidity and sexual fluidity. Society teaches people that things are only binary and anything non-binary is considered out of the ordinary. So there's a lot of stigma surrounding that. People should feel comfortable to come out in different contexts and situations, and counselors should be able to offer that kind of support to help them get there. So now to discuss some of the in-class applications. Homophobia, again, is very similar to biphobia. Homosexuals are often thought to be sinners based on claims that were later written into the Bible. Bisexuals share the same sex attraction with homosexuals that are often associated with sinning. They are often stereotyped as indecisive or greedy, with greed being yet another sin. And biphobia can often be not as intentional as homophobia, which makes it more common simply because people don't realize that they're being biphobic. Next, bisexuality actually comes with a higher rate of domestic violence. Domestic violence is common among women already, as we discussed in class, but there are many programs that are set up to help women that provide safe places for women who are victims of domestic violence. Higher rates of domestic violence are experienced by bisexual women than by any other demographic, which is often due to stereotypes of them being disloyal or cheaters. Many domestic violence programs or shelters are primarily heterosexual based and may lack adequate resources for bisexual women. And finally, we're going to discuss a few more risks of being bisexual that extend past the health risks that Dr. James discussed in her presentation. These risks can also affect the quality of life and their simply life happiness. These risks include lack of employment, loss of family and community support, no heterosexual privileges. They might be denied rights to or the benefits of marriage. They may have more difficulty adopting or having children, and they are threatened in personal safety and can often lose credibility. Thank you.